Dynamic Change. My name is Araceli, and I'm a transition wealth advisor. I like the way you're doing that, like this.
I need a haircut. That's why I keep looking at it going, oh
Yeah,
my goodness, when can I get a haircut?
yeah. And as a transition wealth advisor, I like to work with single professional women to rearrange their finances. Today, we have actually a fantastic guest, Marian Grande. And Colette, can you introduce yourself and introduce our guest?
Of course. Hi, everybody. My name is Colette Raba. I am a residential real estate broker that works in GTA West. I help home buyers and sellers try and navigate this crazy market. So I don't know if you've heard, but it's a very much of a seller's market right now. Prices are going crazy. Mortgage rates are really low, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk to Marianne about um, separating in a or when we had her on before, we spoke about how to, a few little tips of how to separate and be nice to each other, if I can remember correctly. So, and today we do want to talk about things that when you want to separate, you should think about the financial aspects of it before you actually separate. And Marianne's going to give us a couple tips, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. So, welcome, Marianne.
Hi, how's everyone today?
Great, Marianne. Tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Okay, so I'm the founder of Absolute Dispute Resolution. I'm a family law mediator and divorce coach. I help my clients settle their matters as amicably as possible without court involvement. I save my clients about 75% on legal fees and stress and time. Court is very time consuming. I don't know if you've heard, but the courts are closed and only hearing emergency matters right now. So even more so, your matter is going to take even longer than it was. Getting to trial is taking over 2 years on a minimum. And I've heard some of my clients over 10 years. So mediation's much
Through
quicker.
court, going through the court
Yeah,
system.
yeah, getting to trial. I have a few clients who have been in the system for over 10 years and they can't get out of that court cycle. Nothing's getting resolved and it just keeps getting adjourned over and over again, and they're spending a fortune.
Oh
So
That's
no.
crazy.
So I guess it's in your best interest if you are considering separation or divorce to make sure that you explore mediation before you actually go to court. I know. Uh,
Well, yeah, and like we said in the last show too, there are two different things here. We're talking about the separation process and then the divorce
yes,
process. So if you're just saying that the divorce, you can still get a separation. You don't need to be in the courts for separation if you're amicable. Is that
uh-huh.
correct?
yeah,
And
that's
then,
right.
yeah, and then the divorce can wait. That could be something that, as long as the everybody agrees on, selling a house, kids, who's going to, take responsibility for everything, you split it up at that point. That's the separation process, right?
Yeah, and that's the difficult part. I always tell my clients that once you've gone through the separation, the divorce part is really just paperwork.
Right.
By the time you get to the part where you need to file your divorce documents with the court, everything should be resolved. You shouldn't have any outstanding issues,
Right. Okay. So
Oh,
now this is
right?
the thing that let's just play a game.
yeah.
Shall we, for our viewers who are not really sure if separation is right for them, and how do they do it, and how do I get started, and it really, it's not like an overnight, like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, I'm sick of your face, it's COVID, I don't want to be with you
Get
anymore.
out.
Yeah, there is a process to saying, okay, is this relationship done? Like, are we really, oh, is it over? And some things that you can do, and it doesn't matter if you're a woman or, I mean,
Yeah.
whoever plays this part in the separation process. If you are interested in thinking about it, or like saying, okay, well, I know, my spouse is whatever, gambling our life savings away. What do we do? So we're talking about the financial aspects. If you're both laid off, is this the time that you really want to separate? There are
Yeah.
questions that you have to ask or answer for yourself before you go through that step,
And you know
right?
what? This is for anybody that is just not when you're separating. Of course, when you're separating,
Yeah,
it's enhanced. The problem is enhanced. But I think that if you are in a relationship, you should be sharing all the financial aspect, whether you are the one managing the finances or not. But you
right,
should know exactly how things are divided and how you're going to be moving forward, because when you are going to separate, that's when the problems begin. Oh no, I think that you should have this, or I think you brought this into the relationship. Oh no, I'm not going to share this with you. And I think that that should be talked about throughout the relationship, just before, even before you get
well,
married,
do
if
you
possible,
find
right?
in that financial world with your clients, do you find that, Araceli, that, and I don't want to sound sexist here, but do you find that like more women, because you deal with women?
Hmm.
Fi-
Well, the
that's
women
your
that
main,
I deal with, they have different, they're at different stages in life. Some of them,
right,
they're single, they have been single forever, and they just need a little bit of help to, have a process on how to manage their finances. Some
right,
others are really, on top of everything, and they just need a little bit of direction.
yeah,
And there's
but in
others that
couples,
yeah, well, not doing couples. I have a little bit of both, but I find myself that a lot of my clients, women are really taking charge of
well, good,
the
okay,
finances,
good,
right?
excellent,
Which is actually really good and encouraging for a lot of people that, because we still have that stigma that most men will take care of the finances, and I've seen it in many cases that
right.
the spouse, in this case the woman, doesn't take care of any of that. As, oh no, my husband will deal with
Well,
it, right?
that was my case. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because that was something that I didn't necessarily. Uh, it didn't it just happened that way. Where, when we were both single people, we got together, we bought a house, and my husband would say, "Let me take care of it. I will take care of it. I will do it." So that was a huge learning curve for me. So this is what we want to talk about today with
Mm-hmm.
Marianne is, what are the things that we can start looking at now before even we are going through a separation? What are the things that I can put into place to give myself a little bit of um, confidence, I guess, to say I'm not going to be out if he, let's say he, and I apologize for really saying he and she, but let's just say in this case we're telling a story
Yeah.
where the man is taking care of all the finances, but it's a joint account, let's say. So when it comes to the woman saying, okay, I want to separate now, what are the things that she can start to do even before she approaches her husband to say, hey, we're done. Like, what are we going to do? So, what do you recommend, Marianne, that we can give advice to people who are thinking about separating? Either, whichever party decides to split, financially, what are some things that they can do to prepare?
Yeah, and I find, I'm sorry if I sound sexist, but I do find that as well. In most of my cases, the man has taken charge of the finances, and the woman always, asks me, I don't know how much money we have. I don't know our account number. I don't know it. So it's really important to, for me, the biggest thing is to open your own account and start saving
Well, and I
before
think it's,
before you say anything. I think
yeah,
that's really important, like financial independence and educating yourself on what you need to do. A lot of people, it sounds silly, but a lot of people really don't know anything about finances. Not only, they have no idea what the balance on their mortgage is, and they don't know what their interest rate is, and things like that,
right.
and they don't have a credit
Insurance.
card,
Yeah,
right?
even insurance too, to say, well, what are your
Yeah,
premiums for insurance? Like, I would have no idea. I have no idea. But this
yeah.
is the thing that, so that's so we're not saying one, two, and three, but we're saying like the one thing that somebody should be doing right now, even before you separate, is to find out what your household finances look like. Start a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
Go in, even just by hand, if you want to jot down numbers for a couple months to see how much your utilities are, how much your mortgage or your rent payment is. Things like check your credit score. I think that's important too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of, it's sad, but a lot of women that I've spoken to also, their husband will take out credit in their name,
Wow.
you
And
know,
that's allowed? You can even do that in this
not like
country?
it happened to me personally. I'm speaking from experience.
Wow.
And yeah, and
I've
they
seen it
didn't
before
know,
too. Yeah.
Well, I
right?
guess, yeah, if you fill out a credit application online or, even
Yeah,
fashion on
Yeah.
paper, they don't
And
see when
sometimes
you mail it
the
in.
yeah, sometimes the woman doesn't even know what they're signing. Just sign here and that's
exactly.
it. So it is important, when I work with my clients, especially with somebody that has just been separated, I always go and do something that is called a network statement. And
Okay.
though it's just a list of all the assets that you have accumulated, whether it's a home, a cottage, you have a second home, maybe you have some investments, have stocks, maybe you have some life insurance that have some cash value, and
Yeah.
any other things that it is like, maybe you have a car that is a vintage car, right? That it's really worth a lot of money. Maybe you have art as well that is worth a lot of money. So there's a lot of things that people accumulate over the years together,
Right.
uh, and you need to put it on a spreadsheet because some of those things, even pensions, right? From if you've seen it, Marianne, if the husband manages their finances and has had a job with a company that has been there for a long time, he's got pension, but the pension also has to be split with the woman. So all of these things, and that's what is very, very important to do that up front, so you know where to start, right? Because then you
Right.
can start negotiating. I'm
Well,
going to give you the house, I keep my pension, things like
sure.
that, right?
Yeah, so that the financial statement is very important, but also you can do it for yourself. So let's say
Of
you're both
course.
working and you don't even want to speak to your spouse yet about it because you need to know what is going on just with your finances, how much you have. Yes, Marianne will tell us that whatever accounts that are together, that their joint accounts have to be split 50-50. It gets tricky because with my experience too, I found the time the timing always moves, right? So if you say, okay, we've written a separation agreement, and until we sign it, things
Mhm.
could change. Like the real estate market, for example, because
Yeah,
we
that
think,
is
okay, our
a
house
big
is
one.
worth $1 million, and then like 4 or 5 months later or 6 months later, now it's 1.2. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
So when it's this kind of moving goalpost, it's a little bit difficult to. So that's why we're saying this now, to financially figure all these things out
Yeah.
before you even approach your significant other or your spouse. To really know what your financial picture looks like first, and then talk to agents if you need to sell your house, if you need to change the ownership on a property too, that's possible. Or let's say you have two properties and one of you can live in one place and one can live in the other, but that's still something that will come later. Write down your wishes. Is that something that you recommend?
Yeah, I really do because I always have an intake meeting with each person separately first to know what their issues are and what they want to accomplish in the mediation. Like, what do you want? Right?
Right.
I did want to say another thing going back to bank accounts. And this is not something a lot of people think of, but I think it's really important. If you don't know what bank accounts you have and you don't have access to them, you don't know if the other person is taking money out of them, right? And it, although you're going to be doing financial disclosure, he could close that off or she can close that off and not put it on their financial statement. So how would you even know that ever existed?
Yeah.
Right.
You
And
don't
if
know. There
we're
could have been,
talking about
you know,
Yeah, and if we're talking about high net worth people too, there can be outside accounts. There can be, Cayman Island, watching too many movies, right? Where we
Yeah.
have these secret, places to hide our money. It's
Yeah.
not typical. I don't want to freak out anybody, but what Araceli was saying about pensions, I think pensions are one of those things where it's sort of like a secret account where you're like, you can't get my pension. I've been working my whole life for this
Mhm.
pension. Why should you get half of it? So,
Yeah.
like, these are the things that we have to know the law from when, and that's where you come in, because
Exactly,
people
right?
understand the law.
So another thing
So,
that I've seen is, I don't know if you've seen it, Marianne, but when women are not, or they weren't in charge of the finances through the marriage, they may not have a credit card in their name. So that's what is so important to get credit, your credit score, check it out, right? And start to get or apply for a new credit card, because the credit that you need is if you are moving and you are going to go to an apartment, in most cases, they will ask you for your credit score,
right.
and that will limit
Well,
you where you're
right.
going.
Even either apartment or
Yeah, a house, whatever it is that
mortgage.
you're gonna do.
Yeah,
If
you need
you're
to get
gonna
a
buy a
mortgage.
house as well, it's gonna
Right.
affect you if you don't have any credit, because
Of course.
having no credit is just as bad as having bad credit.
Right.
So,
So
This is
then,
right. Yeah.
yeah. So then, what's something someone can do immediately
yeah,
to keep their credit good? Let's say.
is that something that you've seen,
Yeah.
Marianne, in the cases that you worked on?
I do. And the other thing I see is throughout the divorce process, a lot of people's credit really declines. Excuse
Right.
me. So the credit declines, right? Because there's legal fees and so forth, and they're looking for a new place or whatever the case may be, whatever the money's spent on. But that starts to affect their credit as well. But in terms of speaking, before they make the final decision, yeah, definitely credit score, you need to figure that out, because it's just like you said, Araceli, like if they don't have any credit in their name, that's a bad thing too,
Mm-hmm.
So some of the
right? And
things
if you
that
don't know it's
so some of the things that someone can do to protect their credit is what before they even
yeah,
separate.
so check
What?
it. First of all, you need to know what you're dealing with, right? So
Yeah.
I would check it frequently, right? And you don't know if there's even been an error in your credit report, right? So even that, check it, make sure that it's okay. You know what's on your credit report too, right? Because like I
Exactly.
said, there could be mistakes. Your ex could have applied for credit in your name. There could be fraud. Like there could be so many factors. So I
Mm-hmm.
think you really need to check your credit and start building your credit, your own independent credit. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and
And
I
Even
think
then
that
even if you
even people
have a
when
security card, right?
yeah, exactly. Even when they people get together, if you've never had a credit card and they're using your spouse, you should make a point to have your own. So then it's accumulating credits, like your credit, it has a rating, because in the case you need it, it's always
Yeah.
there. So
right. So and then you mentioned protecting oneself too. So you want to separate yourself from any joint accounts, any joint credit cards. What
Yeah.
else? Like change your
Um,
passwords. And
a big one that a lot of it's ironic, but a lot of people don't think about it is their will. That is one of the first things I tell my clients in the intake meeting is change your will, because God forbid something happens, you know,
well, and life
it's not going to
insurance.
be what you want.
And
yeah,
you're
oh,
you're
life
talking
Yeah,
about
insurance,
and life insurance.
and the beneficiary. You're
Yeah,
talking about
any,
who's gonna
yeah,
benefit
exactly.
from your right because you
yeah,
don't want your spouse to go and like knock you off and then they get
They get lots of money,
they get the
right?
benefit. Yeah, no, of course
yeah,
we're joking about
yeah.
it, but
So
yeah, you of course.
change your will, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like insurance policy. That's really, I'm still dealing with that too, where even though everybody, let's say my car insurance, everybody's off my car insurance, but he was the primary person on the account. So whenever I get notices in the mail, his name is still on it, and then I have to make another phone call. And then finally, one of the people that I spoke to on the other line said, "You have to just totally close it and open one in your name." And I'm like, "Thank you." Now, after whatever, a year, you're telling me that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. So even not just life insurance, but home insurance, car insurance, everything else that could be joint.
Yeah.
Make sure you're all separate. Yeah. Okay, what else?
Right. And aside from wills, the power of attorney, right? Like you may, a lot of people don't think about that, right? But, or a living will, like those types of things really need to be taken care of like right away, because you don't want your ex to have a power attorney over you.
Yeah,
it's really bad.
Yeah, probably not a good idea. No, you're absolutely right.
No.
The thing is, all of these things that we're talking about today financially, I always kind of put it into like a house, right? If you see a house that is working correctly, there's wires and behind the wall. Nobody sees them. You want to see just a really nice bathroom or kitchen and all sparkly. But if you take care of your finances, that's basically the wiring, right? If the wiring is incorrect, doesn't matter how beautiful your house is. It's not gonna look. You're not gonna have a light, right?
Yeah.
And so take care. Like the finances is like it's hidden, right? Nobody sees them, but they see it with what is happening around you, right? And it is important. All of these little documents. And especially when you're going through separation, I know it's very emotional. I have gone through it, and believe me, it's you don't want to talk to anybody. You feel embarrassed. You feel, in such a vulnerable space that you don't want to really disclose sometimes, right? And I think that is a mistake for people that you need to let somebody, a professional, whether it's like if you're going to sell your house,
right,
or you're going to redo your finances, your life insurance, or somebody like Marianne, which is a mediator, just tell, this is what we are dealing with. How can we get a life out of this situation,
well,
right?
And I agree with you 100%. And I think a lot, like, listen, we're in COVID. It's not a really easy time to get any advice or, a sit down with someone. Marianne is available through just like this, like a Zoom call or a phone call, just to talk about it. The other thing I really liked what you said was, financially, you should, what Araceli was saying, like about, you have that, exactly what came into my mind was, you have that little emergency kit in your house if things go wrong. Financially, you should have the same sort of thing where you have a separate account, you should have an emergency fund. And what Marianne was saying about how this can get very expensive very quickly, and your credit could suffer. This is something that financially, it's very expensive to get a separation, but if you have an emergency fund that can sort of pad your way along.
And then it's in your name, so nobody has access to it.
Right. So that's something that, and you can even explain that to your spouse too, to say, look, we really need to, this is going to cost both of us money. How do you want to do it? Marianne, when you go through somebody like Marianne, that you don't have to pay lawyers and do you have a retainer even, Marianne?
I do. Yeah. I normally have a retainer of $2,000 a person.
Okay, so that's way better even than a lawyer's.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So understanding, like each person is that per couple or per person?
It's per person.
Okay, so you know that as a couple, you're going to look at about $4,000 just in a retainer. So to really do a few of these things before you even speak to Marianne to get ready, and then go to Marianne and say, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? How do I do that? How do we do this together? And if you are amicable in your separation, Marianne would be the perfect person to help you with that.
So
for sure. I do want, oh, sorry, Araceli, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Marianne.
Okay, I was going to say another thing that's really important is to reset your passwords. I had a mediation where the husband confided in me and said that he could see all the emails I sent to his ex-wife and all the emails she was getting. She never changed her password.
Oh, wow.
Just, yeah, which is something you don't think of. The computer saves it, right? Nice and
Right.
easy. But in the end, I had to like pull the wife aside and say, you need to change your password like
Well,
now.
it also goes deeper than that too, because if you share the same Wi-Fi, like in the same house, I know, like I don't trust anybody with computers and knowing
Yeah.
if you share the Wi-Fi and things like that, or if you know your Apple ID or whatever those things are, like that's a huge like, change with all
Yeah.
of it. The other thing when you were speaking too, it just something else dawned on me when people don't realize too that you have your mortgage, but if you have a line of credit on your property, you got to shut that down. So you have to call the bank immediately and say, nobody's allowed to take any money out on the HELOC anymore. Like,
Exactly.
stop. So that is something that I didn't even think about, where I thought, oh, okay, like when I called my bank and I said, oh, my husband and I are going through separation. Immediately she said, we're shutting it down.
Whoa.
So what do you mean you're shutting it down? She goes, oh, just the HELOC. You can't borrow. Nobody can borrow off the HELOC anymore. I'm like, oh, thanks. That's great. So they actually told me that. So that's one huge thing, because there's a lot of money sometimes in that HELOC.
Yeah. And the thing is, people forget about it, and if you're not in an amicable situation,
Right.
then one spouse will say, "Ha, how are we gonna get you here, right?" Because it's
Exactly.
in both our names. So, but
Yeah.
the key here is to make the call to the bank and let them know that you want that frozen and that
Yeah.
nobody can borrow any money,
Yeah.
and that's it, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Well, I think
there
that's
is
great. We got a couple things down on that list that anybody can.
yeah, another thing that it is here, I think that I'm just going through, one of the things that people don't have now is an emergency fund, right?
Yeah.
And if you do have an emergency fund with your significant father, it's either you have to talk to them about it and say, let's just split what we have. So we both start kind of incrementing that emergency fund for the expenses.
Right. It is difficult when one of the spouses earns more than the other.
That's
where the separation agreement comes in, where you say, listen, I want to do this, or we want to separate. How do we do this financially moving forward? Because if you have that lifestyle, and Marianne can talk more about that, where there is that big difference in finances at the beginning of the earnings of each party, that's something that you should really sit down with someone like Marianne very much at the beginning, so the one person doesn't lock out the other. I've seen that happen. I've heard of that story too. And it's that's very difficult. It's very difficult.
So is there any other thing?
Yeah. I was just going to say, the other thing is people should really consider, a cohabitation agreement or a prenuptial agreement, because especially if there's that imbalance in salaries, everybody should take those steps to protect themselves, or if somebody's bringing more to the marriage, or this common law relationship, then you want to make sure that you've protected yourself before. And I know a lot of people do not like it because they think that it's a bad omen, or you're going into the relationship expecting it to dissolve, right? And I don't feel that that's the case. I think you also have to think of it as a business relationship at the same time, because you're combining your finances. And I think that's really, I think that's really important. That's something I know in my situation I wish I had.
Yeah, right. I think it had happened to.
I brought the majority. So when I bought the house, the house was in my name, and I had to split it, even though I was making the payments and I put the down payment. So in the end, had I had done that, that would have saved me a lot of heartbreak.
It's not fair, and especially if you go to the bank with mom and dad, and they give you money for a down payment on a house, let's say, that is gone. That is now 50-50, no matter what. So those are the things that when you do have a separation agreement or a prenup, to actually write all that in to say, okay, look at if we ever do split and we need to split the house. And you can also do that on title too, to say you own only, 70, you own 70%, you own 30, depending on how much you put in. And that will stay on title forever. So until you sell the house. So these are things that even if you don't want to do a prenup, you could do it in a different way that will still protect you and say, okay, this is, or like you were saying, the cohabitate, like you don't have to co-own the property together. You can just have a cohabitation agreement and one person is the owner. So and the other one is paying rent, let's say. So there's a lot of ways to slice it. Talking to the right people before shit hits the fan, right? So
is there any other thing that you've noticed, Marianne, that people can just do it in advance? I like the fact that you said that treat it like a business agreement, which it is really when you look at it. You are in a relationship just like you are in, if you want to do a business with somebody, you write a business agreement, right? A partnership agreement. So it is the same thing, but I think that because it's so emotional, right? Like that you're combining something emotional, then people forget the other part, which is still happening in the background. So
well, and this
what
is
else? Sorry, Marianne.
No.
What else do you see that your clients are having a hard time with, and maybe they could prepare ahead of time?
Really, just knowing even what the laws are, right? I think that's really important to know what you're entitled to. A lot of people are in a common law relationship and assume that equalization is 50-50 on that.
It's not.
And let's say it's not, right? So you move in and the other person owns the house and you're assuming you're going to get 50%. You put money in, right? It's just not in your name. And at the end, they get a big surprise because that's not the way it is. They have to bring it to court under a trust claim and, and then try and get money that way. And I wish they would really change that.
Okay, I have a question.
That's a law that needs to change.
I have a question for you then. So let's say two people do want to move in with one another, but there is no marriage and it is like a common law situation. If somebody comes to you to say, hey, listen, here I am, I'm the owner of the house and this person is going to come live with me. Can you prepare something for them? Or can you assist them on knowing what their rights are or what should be in place before?
I would probably direct them to see a lawyer and have the lawyer do up a contribution agreement.
Okay, so
that agreement will show that you're contributing, what percentage you contribute to that house monthly, let's say. Are you contributing to utilities? Did you contribute to the down payment? Things like that. So I would definitely do that.
Yeah, before you even go through anything, you can get something in place.
Yeah,
okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would do that and then do a will. I would do a will as well, because what if your common law partner passes away? The house doesn't automatically go to you. That's another thing. So,
that
like
is
knowledge
actually
is
another
power,
thing that
right?
I found out, and that it doesn't automatically go to you. It's pretty scary in some cases, right? So
and this can happen over.
And I don't know why they don't change it.
Well, also living with the person for 20 years, like it's not in the top of your mind, like you're not really even thinking about it. So I know a case like that as well, where it's an older couple. The woman who is on title passed away, and now there's this man living in this house that he doesn't own and he has no rights to. So it's a really important thing, I think, for anyone to, and especially what we were talking about earlier too, because of COVID, even if it's a best case scenario, people still it's still painful, it's still anxiety, there's still, things can happen, depression can happen, it could, bring up all these things that you're not ready for, even if it's your decision, right? So it's something that we don't know what's going to happen. And because of COVID, things are taking much longer and they're more difficult to even get answers sometimes. Being on hold constantly, like it's not a subject that we are making light of. It is a big deal to get separated. But if you're really unhappy with, we're not saying don't get separated. We're just saying try and do these tips that we've discussed before you separate to make yourself financially a little more prepared, so you don't have that anxiety.
Okay, so basically, we're just going to recap what we talked about. So the very first thing that you need to do is make sure that you understand the big picture of your household finances. What's there, understand what you have together, what you don't. Check your credit score, and if you have any outstanding loans in your name or together, make sure that you change life insurance beneficiaries and your wills to make sure that your ex is not responsible for you anymore, and your power of attorneys, right? Can you recap the number two, Colette?
Sure. So, like, just to create this your personal financial independence, change passwords immediately, right? Even your Apple ID, everything else is as far as you can go.
Yeah,
Your
everything.
Wi-Fi, your house Wi-Fi password. Obviously, if you're still living together, you might not be able to change that outright. But really check everything, all your passwords. Remove yourself from any joint accounts if you can. Open a new account in your name only. You do have to have a discussion. We do recommend that you have a conversation with your spouse about that. Really remove your name or find out what your name is on with utility accounts, any secondary credit cards, if your name is on any of those that your husband may have opened. The mortgage, find out your mortgage and your HELOC, shut that down immediately if you can, so nobody can borrow and buy a Maserati. Go crazy.
Okay.
And create an emergency fund and have that separate account for yourself. And then you go talk to Araceli once you're
Yes,
ready
please.
to create, and to really create a new plan for yourself, a new budget, because once you're separated, now you have this freedom to say, okay, maybe my spouse didn't think that putting money into RSP was important, or where am I going to put my money? Maybe I want to start doing something else financially with my money. Now that I'm a single person, if you speak to someone like Araceli to say, what do you think is the best place for me to put my money? Then that's something that you can discuss, absolutely. And
But yeah, the one thing that I've noticed is that if the spouse, in this case the woman, decides to keep the matrimonial home, sometimes they have no idea whatsoever what it takes to maintain the property, financially speaking, which is all the bills, property taxes, mortgage, and everything else. So that is very, very important to redo your financial statement or your budget with the current expenses without the income coming from your spouse. Marianne, do you have any final suggestions that you can give to our audience?
You have one that's kind of a little bit different that probably people didn't think of. Change your iCloud password. I did have a situation where a widow remarried and separated then from that spouse, and that spouse changed the password on him, and he couldn't get any pictures or anything from his first marriage. So it was very sad, and so no family pictures, nothing. So little things like that, it ends up being a really big thing. So that's something that you wouldn't have thought of, right?
No, you're absolutely right. That is something that, get those photos. Honestly, because everything is on the cloud. Everything is on, digital. And even the little cards that are in the, when you take a picture with the actual camera, you have that SIM card. Like, whoever has that SIM card has all the pictures. It's really not fair. But if there's some way to do it before you even think, okay, let's separate.
Yeah. Well, I think the best solution is to have your own cloud account. I know that you can, in some cases, you can share some of it. So take a look at what providers are offering right now. But if you do have your own, it's best. So you can control, or you can just copy over whatever pictures you want to keep. So that is awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here today. This was a very, it was close to my heart, and I think to Colette's as well, because we both have gone, and I believe Marian as well has gone through
Oh, yeah.
separation and divorce. So we really do speak from experience,
Well, and we
and
want
I
to
hope
help.
that this helped you. So
Yeah, we want to help whoever is going through it to know that you're not alone in it, and there are people that we can. It's just a conversation.
yeah, and just reach out if you have any question, something that we didn't touch up today, and you want more information. We'll be able to either uh, direct you to somebody else if it's not us that we know the answer. But yeah, by all means, thank you, Marianne, so much for being here and
Thank
sharing
you
all
so
your
much.
wisdom. And thanks, Colette, again. So we'll see you guys next week with another episode. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Araceli. Thanks
Okay,
for joining us.
bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.